You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. Thank you once again for joining us as you do each and every week. Before we get started with the episode, just a couple of quick notes. One of our recent episodes, Joe Galloway, you guys seem to love so much. We love the feedback that you guys were giving us, asking for more from this guest. That's what we hope to get from you guys through our social media sites, through our email, and our website, hazardground.com. We love that feedback. It's a big part of how we make this show better, so we certainly appreciate it. Speaking of our website, hazardground.com, don't forget our partnership with Amazon. That's where you go, hazardground.com. Just click on the sponsors tab or scroll down to the bottom of the homepage, find the Amazon banner, click it, do all your normal Amazon shopping. We'll get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we donate that percentage back to some of the charities you've heard featured here on the Hazard Ground. And that partnership is going great, guys. You are doing an amazing job. So please, every time you go to Amazon, do it through our website, hazardground.com. You don't even have to do anything different. Just as long as you go to hazardground.com first, you'll help donate to veterans and veterans charities. Of course, follow us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast, and keep up with the show, and leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. Now, all that's out of the way, let's get on to this week's episode. Joining us this week is a current member of the United States Army, where he served 16 years. He is a master sergeant with multiple deployments under his belt to Iraq, where one time he was hit with a vehicle-borne IED, another time he was hit with a rocket, managed to survive them both, although he did suffer traumatic brain injuries, and now spends his time creating awareness for post-traumatic stress disorder and PTSD. He is Pasha Palanker, joining us on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Pasha, welcome, man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
No, certainly, and PTSD is a real thing, and it's something we spend a lot of time talking with many of our guests about on the podcast, so we'll get into that coming up later on. We want to start back at the beginning of your career. How and why'd you join?
So I joined in May 2003. That's when I enlisted. But the reason why I joined is my family immigrated here from Soviet Union, Moldova. I was 15 years old when we moved to the United States, and like the place where we lived is a very rough neighborhood. We received welfare, like. By normal standards, it was a rough life, but to me, it was like I felt like I was in a movie. Like every morning for the 6 months, I would wake up and I'd pinch myself.
What city did you move to? You didn't mention the city.
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles? Okay.
Los Angeles, yeah. Yeah, so I was just so grateful to this country for everything that it gave to me and my family that I wanted to give something back. And that's why I joined the Army.
So when 9/11 happened, what were you thinking?
I remember watching it on the news. It was my first year out of high school, and I just remember being in awe and shock. Like, it was surreal.
Was any of that part of the reason why, additionally why you wanted to join, or was it just solely because you wanted to give back because America gave to you? Well,
that lit a bigger fire under my butt to wanting to do it. And so my mom was very anti-military in general, because military in Russia, Soviet Union, is very different than military here. So, she fought me, and then eventually I won. But it took me a little bit more time.
Does she now have a better appreciation for the United States military as opposed to the Russian military?
Oh yeah, definitely. But she's been through a lot, just with all of my adventures in the Army. So now that I'm close to the end, she's in a much better place, but she's been through some sleepless nights, that's for sure. So
you raise your right hand, sign the papers, you're off to basic training. Did you know what you were getting into at the time?
No. So actually, when I decided to join the Army, I knew nothing. I didn't know the difference between Army, Navy, Marine. I just knew military service, and it was Army. So I went, talked to the recruiter. I wanted to be in the Army, but I wanted to stay as close to Los Angeles as possible, because that's where my friends and family were. So I was like, I don't care what job you give me, just put me as close to LA as possible. And he's like, all right, I got Fort Irwin.
I knew you were going to say that.
Fort Irwin, and the only job there is supply specialist. I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. And so that was my initial contract. But then, like a month later, he called me. I was on delayed entry program, and he was like, "Wait a minute, like you speak Russian, you're a U.S. citizen, like." So I was qualified to go into the intelligence profession, career field, and he just started throwing everything at me, and he convinced me to go and switch and become an MI soldier. And so the way he did it, he gave me a choice. He said, I can't give you Fort Irwin, but he gave me every other duty station I could go as an MI guy. And so I got to choose Hawaii, and that was my first duty station.
Well, it's not a bad choice. I mean, when you said close to LA, I'm thinking Fort Bliss. I'm like, Fort Lewis, maybe. And I said, oh, wait, Irwin's in California. Damn. I was like, but wait, who wants to sit? No one wants to go to NTC, period. And you just got stationed there. So fortuitously, you end up in Hawaii at Schofield Barracks. It must have been pretty sweet.
It was, but, being in intelligence, you have to wait on your clearance. So, and sometimes it takes up to 2 years, especially something from my background. And I remember I got to Hawaii, and then for the first 10 months, I was basically cutting grass around Schofield Barracks. And they started, I was in a non-deployable unit, but they started looking for volunteers to go out and deploy and to be a part of this counter IED mission that was being stood up. So as soon as I heard that, I jumped on it, and after that, everything changed for me.
I mean, I assume Iraq had already kicked off by the time you enlisted, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
it was. I enlisted in May.
Okay.
2 months in.
Understanding kind of the time frame of the whole thing. So you volunteer to go to on a deployment. Where did they end up sending you? And give me the kind of the background of the mission and what you were doing.
So I was attached to an EOD team, and it was part of counter IED effort. So without getting into details, we were basically attached at the hip to an EOD team. So anytime there was an IED within our area, we would go out, we'd take the call, whether it's an IED that was detected and we needed to go and detonate it, clear the route, or post-blast, do either for post-blast. And so the first place was Taji. I think you spent some time in that area, so you're probably familiar with it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it wasn't at BIAP where I was initially, I did a convoy once a week to Taji. So very familiar with the area. So it's interesting because when you were there and the IED thing started ramping up, right? Because it started basically late 04 into early 05 and, obviously grew from there. Did you guys feel overwhelmed? I know anybody who's ever been to Baghdad knows that EOD, you can sit on the road and wait for an hour for an EOD team to get there because there's only so many of you guys, and the number of IEDs became so big that it was nearly impossible to get to anybody quickly. But did you start to get that sense like it was just roadside bomb, IED, all day long? Is that what it was for you?
Yeah. I mean, it was nonstop. We would go out and take these calls, and sometimes we'd show up, and the whole route is closed, and there's traffic for miles.
Yeah.
It was an overwhelming experience, and you also felt like being attached to an EOD team because they have a very unique truck, so it's like driving around with a target on your back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think that's how the suicide bomber, the VBID that happened. They were going after the EOD truck. And then just the way things played out, the guy ended up going after my truck instead.
Before you get to that, I want to ask you one more question. So, if you can answer it and feel comfortable, being attached to the IED teams, doing the intelligence portion of it, are the EOD guys helping you figure out sort of the MO of the bomb and how it was made to help lead you to individuals or an individual who may have made it and created and placed it?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
We were working together. It was hand in hand, and we're attached at the hip, and same mission, trying to solve this problem.
Okay. All right. So towards the end of that first deployment, April 2005, it was a suicide bomber in a vehicle. What happened? Tell me the story. Kind of. What do you remember about it?
Okay. So I don't know if you remember. There was a mosque. It was about like a mile or two north of Taji, up on Route 1. There was a lot of IED happening. On the way towards Bakuba, right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So it was, we called it the evil bus. But we were coming back from a mission, and just on the way back to Taji. I was the gunner in the vehicle right behind the EOD truck. And, as we were driving down the route, I noticed I don't know why, the vehicle just got my attention. And as we're driving the vehicle, you know how the cars would go off the road. Yep. When our convoys would pull up. So initially, when the lead vehicle came up to it, the car that VDI did the same thing that all the other vehicles do. It came off the road. But then as the EOD truck started pulling up to it, it started very slowly moving towards the EOD vehicle. And when I noticed that, I was like, maybe just not paying attention. So I started firing off warning shots. So at that point, I don't know if he got startled. He just kind of swerved and was almost completely off the road. And I was like, all right, that's that. And then our vehicle was coming up right after him. And as we started approaching him, he started coming in, pushing into us. And at that point, he was so close. He was probably 2 feet away from me that I couldn't use my crew serves. I took my rifle and I was standing over the top and just shooting at him. And that must have... I didn't see what happened inside the vehicle as I'm shooting over the top, but I must have hit him because he did not detonate right then and there. And as I'm shooting, my driver went off the road into the median, drove around him, and then when he was about 15 feet behind me, our eyes were locked and the thing went up, just got detonated. There's actually an Al-Qaeda video of that whole
really
incident. Yeah.
Is it still on the web now?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Oh, I'm just curious. I would like to see it. It's eerie the way...
You've probably seen it.
I probably have. It's eerie the way you tell that story. I had such a similar thing happen to us, if I can real quick. So when, we ran our convoys, if we ever ran in traffic, let's say we're going north on Route Tampa, right? And whenever we hit traffic, we just jump the median and drive northbound in the southbound lane. And so once we did that, you'd see cars coming the other direction, part like the Red Sea, and it would happen a half mile down the road, everybody knew. And I had the same thing happen to me. I'm looking deep down the road. I'm not looking 10, 15 meters in front of me. I'm looking 100, 200 meters down the road to make sure, we're not rolling up on anything, because I know my driver's looking 50 meters in front of him. And so I remember before we got hit, everybody's starting to part. And like you said, my eyes locked on this one vehicle. And it was this white little 4-door sedan. And for whatever reason, 200 meters down the road, I see him swerving in and then going out. And then swerving in and then going out. I'm looking at this thing going, the hell is that guy doing? And then we start coming up on him. We're going 60 miles an hour. We start coming up on him. And then literally at the last minute, he swerved right out in front of us. Bam, head-on collision. His charge never detonated. We cleared out quick. Yeah. I mean, I got a concussion. I hit I had I fractured my left wrist just because we were going forward with so much force. I braced myself against the windshield. Our truck was destroyed. Like we literally, the whole front end was blown up. Thank God we had that little, we welded those I-beams to the front. We put this dude's front seat in his back seat. Like we were going that fast in a straight head-on collision. It was violent. It was ugly. And I remember, after we cleared out and saw what was going on, you walk back to the car. That dude, if he survived that crash, it was a miracle. I don't think he ever did, but it was ugly stuff to say. But it was just one of those things when you talk about you don't know why you notice that one thing, but it sticks with you, and it always sticks with you.
Yeah. Yeah, the gut feeling. There's something to that.
All right, so you come
I'm
away.
Curious,
Go ahead.
What did he have? What kind of charge did he have inside the vehicle?
He had 2 rounds in the trunk. We saw the wires and we just cleared out. We weren't about to stay around and find out. We called the Iraqi police showed up very quickly on the scene. And at the time I was with the special ops community, called it up, just let them know what had happened. We got the hell out of Dodge and continued. We were actually going to Taju that morning. Now that I think about it. We cleared out, called it up, and it was done. The IPs took care of it because by the time we headed back a couple hours later, it was off the road. So
okay,
but once because we hit the car with such force, the trunk pops open. Right, so we hit the front of the car head on, and the trunk pops open, and you could see it. And we just all of a sudden, it's after you're done crapping your pants. It's everybody get the hell out.
Yeah.
Back the vehicle up as quick as you can and get the hell out. And the other thing too is when it had happened, we were leading a convoy of Iraqi trucks with us. So I had a whole bunch of my Iraqi soldiers that I was training because I was doing foreign internal defense at the time, and we all stopped for the first minute or two after it happened, and then there's just this swarm of like 200 civilians sitting on the side of the road because you hear this massive boom, right? And everybody's coming out to see. That's when I really got nervous more than anything. I'm like, there's a crowd of people, coming around us quickly, and we are severely outnumbered by the number of people there. And I didn't bother to check to see who had guns, but I'm just, you start to worry about this mob that's in the middle of the street coming after you because you're the only Americans around. And again, there was all Iraqi soldiers with us, so it was like 3 American vehicles and like 6 Iraqi Jundi trucks. You know what I'm saying? The jingle trucks that they would drive that we were moving around, and it became that was one of the most overcome fear. I'm like, we got to get the hell out of here fast because this is not going to end up well. This is not the place I want to be. I don't care if they're friendly or not. I'm not going to sit around with 200 people on the side of the road. So we need to move. And so we did, and tried to repair the vehicle. We got it up and running, and on the way back, the whole engine exploded. Oil started going all over the windshield. We were leaking from everything. We literally had to push the vehicle all the way back down Route 1 to Bayap to get through the gate. We got banged up that day. It was pretty bad.
How close were you to the gate when the engine blew up?
God, we had about 2 miles to go. So the vehicle was still sort of running. We just left it neutral, had the Humvee behind it, push it all the way through.
Okay.
Yeah, luckily it was pretty close. But I remember the mechanic was in the back seat of my vehicle, the one mechanic we took with us. And as soon as it blowed, as soon as the oil started squirting everywhere, he just screams in the back, "Fuck!" Because he had worked on it for like 2 hours and he thought he'd solved it. I mean, literally, he had duct tape and glue. I mean, he was just trying to keep it. He's like, "I think I got it, sir. I think I got it." I'm like, "Here, all right, let's go, let's roll." And so we start rolling, and so I'm looking back in the back seat. He's like, "See, I told you." And then we get like 2 miles outside the gate, and the thing explodes, and he just starts cursing up a storm. I'm like, you shouldn't have spoke too soon. So anyway, good times, man, good times. All right. Anyway, back to you. Okay. Thank you for letting me tell that story. But back to you. So this thing goes off. After the bomb explodes, what do you remember immediately after?
So we stopped right away after the IED goes up. We stopped right away. There's one more vehicle behind us, so we got separated. And since we had and I remember we stopped, and my driver and TT, they look at they weren't sure what happened with me, so they were just checking up on me. And I just remember sitting there, my legs were shaking. I was like, because everything happened so quick, and it was a surreal experience, obviously, to go through something like that. especially to have that eye-to-eye contact with a suicide bomber right as he's blowing up. I mean, it's one of those things that'll stay with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So then we stopped. There was actually, this happened right in between. There were two tanks. One to the north of the explosion, one to the south. So it was already kind of, because it was right next to that mosque where a lot of bad shit happened. So the area was secure. So then we went out, like the EOD guy did his thing, and I got to walk around and just, I don't know, just taking in like the scene and like bits and pieces of the suicide bomber everywhere. Yeah, and then the rest of the day is kind of hazy. I was in my own little world after that.
Did you at the time feel like the blast had any physical effects on you?
So that was my first close-up experience with a blast, and I did not know like what a TBI feels like. Back then, nobody gave a shit about TBI. So back then, I had no idea. Like, I thought it was just the adrenaline, because I was out of it for a few weeks. The headaches, the nausea, everything that comes with a TBI. But like we talked about earlier, it was a very busy time for IED, so there's not really time to sit down and like think about what happened, because you're on to the next thing. And that's as far as it went for me. That happened, but let's keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and I wonder, when you look back on it, I know you didn't think much about it then because it was just simply, hey, there's another day, there's another mission, and here we go. Looking back on it, if they had said to you at the time, hey, Posh, man, take 2 or 3 days and just decompress, just hit a reset button and we'll assess things and we'll come back out. Do you think that would have been better looking back on it?
Yeah, it definitely would have been better, because that happened when I got hurt in 2015. I got those few days, and those few days made a pretty big difference.
How so?
I think just taking the time to process what happened and to deal with your symptoms. It's like getting a little tune-up after like the story you just said about getting like crashing into your VBIED. Like your brain just when you go through a traumatic experience, is it better to take a break, fix it up, clean it up, and get yourself back out into the fight, or just push through? I think it's better to tune things up and then get back to where you can perform better.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. For me, at least, and this is just personal to me, but part of me feels like if I would have had 2 or 3 days after that incident to sit there, all I would have done was think about it, like to a point where it might have consumed me. For me to turn the page and move on to something else, I think in a strange way may have helped me. Now, I still have like flashbacks about that particular event, and certain things still kind of stay with me about it. Part of me, now that as I'm listening to you talk, part of me thinks that if I had sat there and thought about that event more, I wonder if the flashbacks would have been better or worse. Like, would there have been less of them, or would there have been more of them if I had time to sit there and stew for a couple of days and think about everything that just had happened? Because in a certain sense, the idea of coming to grips with your own mortality can be overwhelming, and that fear can consume you, and it's normal. That happens to everybody. But I think the people who just recognize that and embrace it and say, look, this is part of the job and this is part of what goes on, I can't let that overwhelm me and just move on to the next one. I think there's some value in that, no?
Well, I think this is individual. Like, I think that individual situation depends on. I think it depends on the situation, and it depends on the individual, because we all handle things differently. Like,
right,
why do some people thrive through PTSD, and why do some people, go the opposite route? I think with that stuff, it's like, I understand the value of just like, after that happened, just keep pushing so that you don't get kind of like walk it off and keep stay in the game, stay in the fight. I completely understand the value of that. For me, for that situation, because none of the people, service members got hurt during that VBID. I didn't have any bad memories about it. It was just like unbelievable experience that I just went through. So I didn't have a lot of heartache with that experience. It happened. But I don't know. I don't know whether take the knee or just get back into the fight. I think it depends.
Do you think that in the moments after that happened, did you have time to think about, holy crap, I could have just died? I mean, did that ever, overwhelm you at all?
So I never thought I almost just died. Like, I've had a few of these experiences now, and I just don't think like that. It's not like a bravado thing. My brain is just not wired that way.
Right.
Maybe if it was, I wouldn't get into these situations. Like, I had an even more surreal experience later on in that deployment with the IED, and even back then, I don't know. I just didn't think like that. Like, I almost died.
Okay. Let's kind of, I don't want to span too much time because, the next thing that happened to you was 10 years later, but how many more deployments do you go on in between 2005 and 2015? And how much of any of this stuff is coming back to you?
Well, so before we get into that, so at the end of that deployment, I was about 2 weeks out from going home. I had probably the most significant and the closest I've been to death, like my personal experience, that happened in September of 2005. That's probably the biggest. That's something that's the biggest part of me, like out of all of my run-ins with death. So I want to talk about that one, if you don't mind.
That's fine. I mean, let me ask you: is it because of the event still haunts you, or is it because of an emotional sort of detachment from it?
It doesn't haunt me. This is the event where I lost hearing in my last year, and I have very loud ringing. So it's always with me. Like that explosion is always with me. And whenever I'm going through a rough time, like, it's a quick touch point back to that day. And it's actually, tomorrow is going to be, 14 years since that day. Since that day happened. My 14-year anniversary of that Alive Day. But for that, we were 2 weeks out, and I was in a 3-man team. We were doing left seat, right seat with a team that came in to replace us. It was not my day. It was my day off, but my team leader threw out his back in the morning, and the call came in. So I was like, I'll take your spot. So we went out. It was a typical IED call. We blew it up, went in to look for any secondary as we're going down the road to see a wire. So we were on back, send the robot down there. The robot looks for where's the wire going, and couldn't find anything. So me and the EOD guy went back down. And as he's pulling on that wire, trying to figure out where it's going, I was like, I'm going to walk away from you. And I was walking around looking to see if I could find anything from the first IED, and I'm standing in the middle of the road. And right in the middle, there's a piece of blue electrical tape, obviously a piece from the first IED. So I just like feeling it with my toes, and I kick it, and it goes to the side of the road. I take my 3 or 4 steps, and as I'm standing there looking at it, like, boom, like everything around me goes just orange. And then the next thing I remember, I'm just laying on the ground. and like everything is falling on top of me, and I can't feel anything. I can't feel shit. So at that point, I went through this surreal experience. I was like, "Is this it? Like this? Like we all wonder what it's like to die." So like I even remember thinking back then, like during the deployment, I watched a bunch of Simpsons episodes. So I remember like Homer Simpson, how his body just elevates, his soul elevates from his body every time he does something stupid. I was waiting for something like that to happen. and as I'm laying there, I start to feel burning in the back of my legs. And I was like, oh shit, I can feel that. I'm alive. Oh, my legs are gone. And then I wiggle my toes and I could feel them pressing against my boots. I was like, fuck yeah. And then I do the same thing. I touched the tips of my index finger and my thumb, and I could feel both my hands are still there. And then I checked my groin area. I was like, oh, holy smokes. And then by that time, the medic ran up to me, and like the person, he was like, holy shit. So then, like, they end up examining me, and the EOD guy told me there were at least 155 rounds under me.
Oh my God.
When that thing went off. The blast feed was 15 feet wide, probably like 15 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 6 feet deep, and I was standing inside of it. And I flew, 10, 15 feet, but out of all that shrapnel, not one of them touched me. It was unbelievable. So extremely lucky.
That was your angel flight, man. That 10, 15 feet, you were an angel.
Whatever. Yeah, it was something. But I just remember they put me on a stretcher and they started carrying me, and they like somebody shooting at someone at that point. But I didn't have anything. I wasn't missing anything. I was like, I want to walk away from this thing. Because that was my last. I knew that was my last trip out of the wire during that deployment. So I got up, I took a picture of that blast beat, and I very slowly walked 100 meters to the Humvee.
Why was it so important for you to walk?
I don't know. There was just something in me. There's I want to walk away from this. Yeah. And so, and I'm kind of thinking about your question from the VBIDs. Do you think it's important? You think it would have been beneficial for you to take a few days off? After that one, definitely.
Yeah.
But after that one, I remember it was probably a few months that I had liquid draining out of my ear, that, whatever liquid is in your head.
I mean, you lost your hearing in your left ear from that. Was there? I mean, I assume there was massive ringing after the whole thing, right?
Yeah. I still have it. Still, I'm listening to it as we speak. And actually, I remember when they brought me back, when we got back on base, it brought me to see the doc, and the doc looked in my ear and was like, that will heal in about 6 to 8 weeks, and the ringing will stop. It'll be good. And that was not even close.
I mean, obviously you suffered a concussion and more from that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did they diagnose you at the time of the concussion?
No, that was 2005, man. That was not a thing, and he only knew the impact of being invisible, the stuff that nobody can see. I'd much rather have a scar on my body than to deal with this stuff.
Right.
Because at least people can understand if you're physically hurt.
All right. Let me ask you. You were awarded a Purple Heart for that, and I ask you this sort of lightly, so take it with a grain of salt. Does it bother you that you got a Purple Heart and yet you were able to walk away from the thing? It
doesn't bother me, but it's something that I think about a lot because I have a few friends who are triple amputees.
Right.
And what they've been through, like, I could not imagine. And I have 2 Purple Hearts now. But they have 1. And that like, there's definitely guilt that comes with these 2 Purple Hearts when I think about other guys that have suffered a lot more than I have.
The only reason I asked that, Pasha, is because, just from my own experience, you know how soldiers can be sometimes. And maybe they ask it in jest, but, after a couple of incidents, they looked at me, "Are we going to get Purple Hearts, sir?" And I looked at them like, "Are you out of your flipping mind? You're fine. Like, you're fine." Like, I'm not being a tough guy here. I'm like, you're walking. You have all your limbs. Like, you didn't even shed blood. Like, you're going to look me in the eye and ask me that question. Are you serious? So I was just curious how your reaction was. Because I know a lot of guys who are like, and I hate it. I hate that I have it.
Yeah. So Purple Heart, these Purple Hearts, they have also been, what I noticed, a lot of guys that have had similar experiences, maybe not as bad. Like, maybe they're right on the border. Should they get a Purple Heart or not?
Mm-hmm.
Now that everything is said and done and they're out and they're struggling with these invisible wounds, like, having a Purple Heart, I think, gives you a little bit of, like, okay, like, there's something there.
I know what you're saying.
When,
I see what you're saying.
When somebody, if somebody just is a combat vet, I see that there's a different, like, I've noticed there's a different level of treatment having a Purple Heart and not having a Purple Heart.
No, that's fair.
And
I respect
I really
that.
feel for those guys.
No, I mean, I didn't think of that, and I apologize if I offended you or anybody listening. I was a little short-sighted in thinking about that, but I that makes sense because, as you said, sometimes you wish you had that scar because it's easier for people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest struggles with this stuff that nobody can see. Like, even my wife, who's been, like, a trooper, like, she's been through so much, and she's lived we've been married for 10 years. But even after all this time, it's still hard for her to understand why is it that I can't do certain things. Like, if I'm missing, like, my leg or, like, below the knee amputation, you're not going to expect me to go and just run a marathon. That's very understandable. But if I have a hard time being in, like, places with lots of stimulation, why? Like, that doesn't make sense to somebody who has not been through what we've been through.
Yeah.
So I think that's where Purple Heart helps.
No, I get that makes sense, and that's fair. And again, I apologize if anybody got offended, but I just in experience in doing this, there are some people who are looking for just to pin a medal on their chest, unfortunately, because it kind of does a disservice to all of us. And I'm sure if you've been in the military long enough like we have, you run into those people. And it kind of casts a bad shadow. And, of course, there's all that stolen valor BS that people do, which is also really stupid. But neither here nor there.
Yeah.
All right, fast forward to 2015. You're back in Iraq, and you're over in Fallujah. And this time, it was a rocket that was after you.
Yeah, I was. So that deployment, I went all over Iraq, like all over the country, and I got to Fallujah. It was in TQ, for those of you who are familiar with it. And I got there the night before, and then the next morning, like, we've had some indirect fire coming in that was land like 500 meters short or 500 meters long. Like, we would hear it, but it was not a big deal. But man, this thing came in, and like we're on a tiny little compound, and it hit smack dab in the middle of it, like destroyed 2 Humvees, and there was nothing. Like, we had some of the cement barriers, but there was not even enough space to fit all of us in. So yeah, it happened. The worst part about that, like, I was on one end, there was another guy on the other end. Like, we got probably the brunt of the blast from that rocket. But the worst part after that is knowing that they have you dialed in, and then, like, how do you sleep at night? Because we were just in the trailer. Like, there's nothing. Like, I remember sleeping full body armor with a helmet on, just, like, on a cot. And that was probably the worst part about that situation.
Yeah, again, we had one similar on my second deployment where they shot a mortar right into where, you know, the for people who aren't military, they're called CHUs, containerized housing units, but landed right next to the whole, in the middle of the where all the CHUs were, but, you know, literally about 5 feet from where a CHU was. Thankfully, that guy was on leave and his room was empty, so everything that went through that little, you know, tin can, he wasn't there for. But, you know, when they're that dialed in, it's like, damn, you know, it's hard to rest. There are nights where are you familiar with what the JDAM is and the alarm that would go off? So when that alarm goes off, man, like you pop out of bed, and I literally pop out my door and just jump in the bunker right next to where my CHU was. I mean, it became so routine, you know, like I could literally in 2 hops be out of bed and under the bunker, out the door. Like some of it comes so quick, and it becomes such a reaction. It's like, what the hell do you do, you know?
Yeah. You got like 5 seconds, right? Before, like from the alarm to impact. There's some funny stories that happened. Like, you know, there's always humor in combat, but I remember after that rocket hit, every time that alarm, cause before that, the alarms would go off and we kind of lazily stroll into the bunker. But after that thing hit, like, no matter what you were doing, you're going to run. And there was, I think there was only 2 of those things on the base, like 2 of those little bunkers. And you would sit in there, packed in there like sardines. And, like, I remember one Italian dude, like, holding his, like, dirty-ass straws. And a guy that's, like, shorter than him standing there, like, his face right in his dirty underwear. And, like, we're all kind of laughing about it.
You know, it's funny, and this is kind of PTSD wrapped up in a little nutshell here. So that JDAM would make an alarm, right? So you'd hear the whistle, you know, and the JDAM would go off immediately, right? So I'm back from deployment. This is my second deployment. I'm back from deployment maybe, I don't know, less than 30 days. And I'm in my, I'm back at work. I went right back to work immediately. Didn't even take any time off because I just wanted to get back to life, you know? And I was talking to a guy in his office, and you know the iPhone has all the different kind of alarms on it?
Yeah.
One of them sounds exactly like that JDAM, and that was his ringtone. And his phone rang, and when it happened, I literally dove underneath his desk. Out of pure reaction, I dove underneath his desk, and it took me like 3 or 4 seconds to realize what the hell it was and what was going on. Pop back up, and he's looking at me like I literally had just a third eyeball and a tongue growing out of the middle of my head. And I'm like, that old habits die hard. Got it. Thanks. That's not the JDAM. Just your phone. Got it. Noted. But that's PTSD wrapped up in a nutshell, folks.
Yeah, I know exactly the alarm you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's even to this day when I hear it, my mind just goes right to, you know, my neck snaps, my eyes bug out real quick, and I'm like, okay, all right, because it stays with you. It's the same thing. And again, this is just a personal thing with me. Fireworks on the 4th of July, I'm inside the house, man. I just not all of them, but some of them are very, very similar. And you know, I can remember one 4th of July. You know, I was out with the wife and the kids, and you know, the kids are watching one of their first fireworks shows, and the fireworks are going off, and I just start hearing radio calls in my ear. Right? Like I hear guys' voices on the radio in my ear. And I don't know why. That's the first time that had ever happened that I started hearing radio voices, but it went on for like 10 minutes because the whole fireworks show lasted like 15 minutes, you know? And it's stuff like that, you know, I don't know if I'll ever get away from, but you just kind of learn to cope with and deal with.
Yeah, that's the key. Like these experiences, they'll be part of us for the rest of our lives. And you know, like at this point, I'm in a much better place than where I was after I came back from that deployment in 2015. So, like, I'm grateful for them. But man, it's hard to live with them. when you don't understand like what the fuck is going on, when you're just feeling these things and you're jumping under these desks or like panic attacks in grocery stores. Yeah. And it's a little like these little stupid things that take you back there.
Oh yeah, I mean, you don't even know what the triggers are, because if you could pinpoint them all, it'd be a lot easier, right? You just avoid them, but you don't know what the triggers are. Sometimes they just come out of nowhere, and it happens. But let me ask you here, Posh, because PTSD wasn't a thing after your first deployment, right?
No.
It was a thing after your second deployment, and so I wonder, at what point in time, was there a point in time in between 05 and 15 where you thought you might have had PTSD?
Man, this question is so difficult to answer because, like, again, looking back from 2005 and 2015, I feel like I was slowly rolling down the hill, like, into a bad place. And when 2015 happened, I fell off a cliff. Like it expedited my process to where like I could not function after I got home from 2015, from the 2015 deployment, and I was forced to get home. I think if that deployment did not happen, or if I didn't get hurt again, then I would have continued to roll down that hill until like I would have gotten to the bottom and not even realized that I was there. So to answer your question, I did not think I had a problem. I did not think I had PTSD because I thought PTSD was something different than what it is. Like I remember I even got, have you heard of the STD, the stellate ganglion block shot? It was just on 60 Minutes, Dr. Sean Mulvaney. I was one of the first guys that he was trying that stuff on. And I remember getting them in like 2013, 2014. And that was for PTSD. But even then, I was like, I'm good. Like I did not seek any help. I just that shot. That was it. It was, it's kind of like taking a Motrin for a headache, and then you move on. And I think that's the danger of PTSD. It's that we're living with it, we're suffering from it without realizing. And because we don't realize what's happening, instead of dealing with that pain, we numb it. And because we numb the pain, we built these. This is what I did. So I don't want to speak for everybody. That's what I did. I built these habits, these bad habits that slowly caused my life to spiral out of control. And then you lose yourself, you lose your identity in the process.
When you say out of control, can you tell me what you mean? Can you describe what out of control was?
Well, the biggest thing for me was anger. Like my anger was so bad. Because we have that social pressure and the peer pressure at work where you want to keep it together in front of your peers, right? So I'm still at work. I still do my job. I keep it together. But living with TBI and PTSD, you have limited amount of bandwidth to deal with life in general. So by the time I would get home, like I could not take I have 4 boys, and I couldn't take 2 of them talking to me at the same time. God forbid somebody would like throw a glass of water on the table, or I would overreact. And, the whole night is ruined. And then I have this sense of guilt. So then what do I do when I'm feeling like that? I would drink to like numb the pain and make it go away. And then that cycle would repeat itself. And it lasted for years. But what happens when you drink? When you drink, you sleep like shit. When you sleep like shit, the next day you don't have the energy to exercise, to take care of your body, so you start gaining weight. And what else do you do when you feel like shit? You eat junk food, because that's what we crave when we don't feel good. So it's these like sleep, nutrition, and exercise. I feel like they all go by the wayside when you start falling into this cycle and start building these bad habits. And like I felt like I lost myself. I was not the person, like the soldier that I wanted to be. I was not the dad or the husband that I wanted to be. And because of that 2015 deployment, I was able to realize it without because it expedited my process. You know, if I just put a ruck, like if I give you a weight and put it in your ruck, and slowly over time it's going to get heavier, but you're not going to feel it the same way if I just put like a 100-pound dumbbell in there. You're going to feel that difference much quicker, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what that 2015 deployment did for me. Is like, oh shit, I need help. So that's when my journey to recovery started, realizing that I'm fucked up and I need help.
Let me ask you, so you meet somebody like me, for example, who's in the military, who told you some of the stories that I told you. What would you say to them if they said, no, I don't have PTSD, I'm fine?
So it's very hard to convince somebody, like, whether they have PTSD or not. What I would do is I would ask them questions, because I know how PTSD impacts me. I know how PTSD impacts family. So I would just ask questions based on my life experiences. And the only way you get somebody to really see something is they have to figure it out themselves. And the way I would do it is by asking the right questions. Yeah, I think that's how I would approach that.
Let me just be raw and real for a moment. So I've never sought treatment for it. I've never wanted to, despite the fact that, you know, I still have flashbacks. You know, some of the anger issues that you talk about, you know, how you'd snap at little things, I've experienced. There's several reasons why. And I think these reasons are germane to a lot of people. One is somebody's still serving. I don't want to go down that road because I want to finish my career. Because I know the minute I go down that road, the Army can turn around and say, you're done. And I'm not willing to risk that at this point. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I don't want to go back through the VA. I mean, to get my first round of disability was nearly a 2-year process, and I just don't feel like doing it again. The letters, the phone calls, the doctor's appointments, I don't need it. It's like an extra aggravation with everything else that I don't even want to be bothered with. Now, short of somebody who's, you know, I mean, listen, again, being raw, I go to therapy for a variety of reasons. You know, I mean, it's just, I think everybody needs it. I think it's, you know, your tune-up, as you talked about. I think everybody could use one. Everybody needs a therapist. But short of doing that, there's nothing else I am actively doing to treat any of the symptoms that I have. So when you hear somebody say something like that, do you feel like you want to convince them maybe they should go seek treatment or no?
I feel like it sounds like you're doing well, right? You're living with your symptoms and you're doing pretty well. You're progressing in your career. You're part of this pretty awesome podcast. You're making a difference. But if you treat the system, you can improve things by addressing the symptoms that you're dealing with. Because I know it does not feel good for me to snap at my kids over something that's because of me, not because they did something wrong, but it's because I don't have control of my anger, right? So if let's just use that like as an example.
Okay, that's fair because that happens to me a lot, by the way.
Yeah, and so one of my after that 2015 deployment, my wake up call was when I saw my anger, like the way I talk to my kids, I saw it in my kids the way they're talking to each other. And that was like I had so much guilt that came with that. And continuing to treat our kids in that way, they are going to grow up with our PTSD. So that's why I think it's important to get that out of control. Like, and specifically anger. Anger is so common. And, being later on in my career, I see a lot of kids like that have been messed up by their parents' PTSD.
It's a scary thought there, Pasha. I mean, like, it really just hit me with a dose of reality. When you say that your kids are going to grow up with your PTSD, that's a wake-up call.
Well, it is. The kids, you can tell your kids whatever you want, but they don't listen to what we do. They repeat. They don't listen to what we say. They repeat what we do.
Right.
That's the reality. But you know what? I've also noticed that as soon as I started learning how to handle my anger, I've noticed an improvement in my kids. And now as my son goes to therapy, I go to therapy with him. And something that used to be like a bad part of our life, like something that was very negative, is turning into a positive, because now it's a bonding experience, and we're learning together how to go through this process. And I think he's going to be at an advantage because he's learning how to deal with his emotions at a young age compared to me when I started learning about this when I was in my 30s. So there's a lot that can be done. It just, like, the first step is realizing that something needs to be done. And you have to find your own reasons why it's important for you to do more than what you're doing if you still continue to struggle with these episodes of anger.
So where do people go now if they want help? Like, what do you tell people who think that they may need help?
So the first thing I would do is if you're a veteran, and the first step is to go and be around other veterans. There's nothing like going to a veteran event, like, especially after you've been away from it. Like, I remember that feeling. I went on a fishing trip, and there was a bunch of other combat vets there, and I used to carry this like huge. I felt like very heavy pressure on my chest, and like I felt like it was crushing me, like, day in and day out. And when I went to that veteran event, like, it was the first time in a long time that I felt understood, that I felt like, I don't know, like I belong. Even though I was still on active duty, it was just something different about going to a veteran event and just not being worried about the job, just like spending time with the guys and feeling understood. So first step is find a veteran community around you. And there's so many of them. Like, Facebook is a really powerful tool for finding all that stuff. And then there's so many, like, I know you had a bunch of people from Headstrong, and you said that I was involved with them, but they make it so simple and so easy for you to get help. The only thing you need to do is just call a phone number, and they'll take care of the rest.
Right.
But Headstrong is not. That's just the first thing that popped into my head. But there's other organizations, like doing stuff like becoming part of Team Rubicon, where you continue to serve and you're around other veterans. It's you essentially, like, if you're struggling, you're broken. And how do you fix yourself when you're broken? You build yourself back up. So, and you build yourself back up by taking care of yourself, by putting yourself in the right environment. That's how I would do it. That's the advice that I would give to other guys who are struggling. But you got to take action.
So you're coming up on the end of your career, and if you're comfortable talking about it, you're in front of a medical board right now. Is any of you sort of disappointed or upset that you're not going to be able to get to 20 years because of the medical situation?
Yeah, I do feel like it's going to feel a little bit incomplete But at the same time, they've been trying to get me in front of the med board since probably 5 years ago, and I kept fighting it off, but now I feel it. Like I can't. I struggle so bad with administrative stuff that like I was NCOIC of a training shop for my battalion. I couldn't write evaluations for my soldiers. I had to have a couple of friends who would do it for me. It's just like I feel that it's time.
Well, is there some sort of relief in that? Is there some sort of release in that you're not fighting it anymore? That you're just kind of letting what will be?
Yeah. At first, it was a struggle. Like at first, it was again. It's a big part of my identity, being a soldier. But once I got over it, like once I realized there's more to life, that I can serve in different ways, in different capacities. Now it's like, okay, I see a new path, and I can start building myself up and getting ready for this next phase of my life where I can continue to serve.
Well, Pasha, I mean, your honesty has been amazing. I think the message is certainly important. It's poignant and clear. And certainly, the fact that we're having this conversation, I think speaks to where we are when it comes to PTSD, because it's not a conversation we would have had 10 years ago. It's not a conversation people wanted to have 10 years ago. And you and I here, two basic strangers, are sitting here sharing stories about some of the most personal things that have affected us throughout our careers. And I think that speaks volumes to where we are in this discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. That's the key to solving this veteran suicide problem. It's us talking about it, us helping those of us that have been there, helping those who are still in the middle of that struggle. And that's what I'm going to do once I'm retired. I don't know what I'm doing. Like I feel like I've been rambling for the last hour.
No, not at all, man.
I'm going to continue to talk about PTSD and just hoping to raise awareness so guys can start taking care of themselves by realizing what's happening. Otherwise, it's like you're fighting an invisible enemy.
Yeah. It's definitely not rambling, brother. There's a lot you said that people need to hear. There's a lot you said that people have been wanting to hear. There's somebody just like them out there struggling with the same things. So far from rambling, brother.
Yeah, and I just extend this invitation. If any of you guys are struggling out there, you can find me on any of the social media stuff. Send me a message, Pasha Palanker, and I'll help in whatever way I can.
On that note, Pasha, thank you so much again for your time. We certainly appreciate it. You've been outstanding. I love sharing stories with you, brother, and let's have a cold one together someday in the future, man.
I would love that, Mark. Thanks for sharing your tough experiences as well.
Pasha Palanker, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.